You allow him to turn the corner. Mama, there goes that man.
Oh, if you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball. Oh, boy.
Welcome, everyone, to the First Pick Podcast in collaboration with Hooper, a brand new innovative sports basketball app that promotes community. I guess a lot of you want to know what the First Pick Podcast is. And the First Pick Podcast is basically your number one source for anything basketball related. I talk NBA, WNBA, we talk Olympics basketball. I wrote for the Hooper Substack where we talked about what a gold medal would mean for every NBA player on the roster, talked about the WNBA All-Star Game. We just kind of like to cover a bunch of different topics and like to give our 2 cents about it. For those of you that are hearing their very first episode of the First Pick Podcast, I actually started this back in 2023. I realized that I knew a little too much about basketball, and I thought to myself, what can I do with that information, everything that I just know? And I figured, why not just make a podcast? So I just sit here and I talk basketball. I sometimes bring on guests. You guys can hear a bunch of my past episodes available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you hear your podcasts. And we have those available. I did a draft analysis with my boy Michael. I've done draft analysis episodes with other draft classes. It's just really fun ball talk. So strap in. Make sure you guys are excited. Recommend this podcast to a friend. I'm really, really excited to see where we can take the podcast to, as I've mentioned a billion times in that promo video. By the way, thank you guys so much for reposting and sharing that and liking that. It really means the world to me. We're kind of in the middle of the NBA offseason. I like to think of them as the dog days of the offseason for the NBA. We have nothing really happening, but we're kind of turning that corner. NBA training camps are starting for some teams. We got some really, really exciting stuff to kind of talk about, but I really want to kind of disregard all the NBA stuff for now, and I want to talk about the WNBA. Just as soon as Friday, September 27th, the WNBA has announced Caitlin Clark as the Rookie of the Year. Now, that's pretty big in my opinion. Caitlin Clark has been such a transcendent talent for the WNBA, and in my full honest opinion, I feel like the WNBA, like many others on NBA Twitter, feel like the WNBA is doing a pretty terrible job at marketing her. I don't know if any of you guys saw that famous graphic that went around for the WNBA, but when the Indiana Fever were scheduled to play their matchup on the playoffs, she was not on the graphic. It was her teammate, Kelsey Mitchell. Well, I'm all for Kelsey Mitchell, and I think she's a bucket. She's an efficient 20-point-per-game scorer. She went to The Ohio State. She's really, really good. I think the WNBA needs to market Caitlin Clark a little more. I just think what she's doing, the stats she's providing, the must-see television aspect of it all, that's really what kind of separates her from everyone else, even just as a rookie. That she started really, really tough. You know, her start to her WNBA career was pretty rocky at first. Had a learning curve, and she kind of just took off there. She was getting multiple 20-point per games, double-doubles, assisting her teammates, which, for those of you who don't remember, when she was back in Iowa, her main takeaway was she shoots too much, she shoots really inefficient shots, and she doesn't get her teammates involved. Now, while maybe her shots are a little unwarranted, it's because she can make those shots. She's a very efficient shot maker. She knows what she's doing. And then the assists are just coming to her. She's passing to her teammates in wide open lanes where they just have to catch it and hit a layup or hit an open three. I think she plays a really pivotal role. And just, I guess, being part of the media, I just want to give her flowers, because I do think that she gets a lot of lack of attention from the media. Even though the attention she does get sometimes is unwarranted negative media. You obviously can't talk about Caitlin Clark without talking about Angel Reese. Angel Reese ended the WNBA season with an unknown wrist injury. No one knows how she got that. Some people say she got it when she had a fall during one of her games, but nevertheless, they shut her down for the rest of the season. She ended up, in my eyes, finishing as second in Rookie of the Year race, which that's not even a problem, because Angel Reese is a really, really good basketball player. She rebounds the ball well. Granted, is she inefficient? Yes, but I mean, she's a rookie. Everything's going to come in time. The fact that her rebounding is already at such an elite level and she's broken multiple records, that in itself speaks volumes to how good she is. But again, I mean, when you put the 2 and 2 together, they play completely different games. In my best comparison, it's like you're comparing a female Stephen Curry to a rebounding god, like, I don't know, like a prime Andre Drummond. It's just completely different players. And that may have flown over people's head because they think of Andre Drummond as a bench player now, but Andre Drummond was actually a beast back in his day when he was playing with the Pistons. Granted, didn't win winning basketball, but he was actually really good. You got to check your stats. The WNBA also announced that Minnesota Lynx star Napheesa Collier has been awarded the Defensive Player of the Year. What a defensive beast. Honestly, The stocks that she puts up almost every night are second to none. She's one of the best defenders in the W. So congrats to her again. And also we want to give her flowers. A'ja Wilson just won her 3rd straight MVP. If that does not put you in the GOAT conversation, I don't know what does. I use Reel to see everything as far as stats go. And A'ja Wilson, whenever I'm on the app and I see the Las Vegas Aces play, she's putting up ridiculous numbers. It's like she's putting up 25, 30 with double-doubles and blocks. And she's shooting like a 3 or 2 a game. And she's just affecting winning in such an amazing way that, I mean, how can you not give her the MVP? Granted, Breanna Stewart over there in New York played terrific basketball also. She's won an MVP in the past. I just think A'ja Wilson, the way that she plays the game with such force but yet gracefully, that is something that should honestly give you the MVP, which she right deservingly so. Now, here at the First Pick Podcast, we also talk about a lot of, granted, we just had a WNBA segment. We also talk about NBA segment. We also like to talk about, the past players that played the game that kind of shaped the way that we think of the game now. And I don't think it would be justice to do a podcast. We have Hooper out there in Chicago. This is for the people out there in Chicago. Derrick Rose has retired from the game of basketball. Random Monday, they decided to waive Derrick Rose, the Memphis Grizzlies. Everyone thought he was going to sign into a contender. Everyone was figuring out spots where he kind of best fits. But Derrick Rose ultimately decided to retire from the game of basketball after 16 years in an NBA season with 6 different teams. I mean, Derrick Rose, the youngest MVP ever, and I actually want to talk about this because a lot of people that are just getting into basketball, they don't realize how good Derrick Rose was. Derrick Rose, when he came into the league, won Rookie of the Year. The year after, put up pretty good stats. And then the year after that, his 3rd year in the league, he jumped up into MVP candidacy. And then ever since then, he's been dealing with injuries. He was never the same after that series that he had that unfortunate torn ACL. But Derrick Rose is the embodiment of, I'm going to struggle, but I'm still going to try my hardest. Derrick Rose went through hell and back. For those of you who don't remember, when he went through that phase of switching teams a lot, when he went to Cleveland and that transition to the Timberwolves, that was really tough. That's when he got traded to Utah. Utah cut him, and he was a free agent for a while. And everyone had already given up on Derrick Rose. No one really thought he was going to be that guy. And it wasn't until October 31st on a random Halloween game, Derrick Rose decided to turn back the clock and let everyone know who he was. And that night, people saw a glimpse of what could have been. He was making threes. He was driving in the lane. He was efficient. He was just a force to be reckoned with. Young D. Rose was an athletic freak, is an understatement. Honestly, the stats that he was putting up weren't eye-popping, but the style of play was. He would drive in with force, but yeah, with such grace. That's why when he went to Memphis, everyone thought he was going to be this amazing mentor to Ja. It does suck that year that he went to Memphis, Memphis had terrible injury luck. They literally had 15 guys out at one point in the season. That's probably the most ever. But, I mean, he would have been such a great mentor. It does suck that he kind of retired. I kind of wish he retired with a ring. Now, another thing I do want to talk about is people like to say, does Derrick Rose deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? I want to bring up this tweet that Nick Young, a.k.a. Swaggy P, for those of you who watched ball in the 2010s era, really good scorer, by the way. He said, if D. Rose is a Hall of Famer, at J crossover, Crawford better be one. A J crossover, Crawford being Jamal Crawford. Full transparency, Jamal Crawford is not someone that you just whiff over and be like, oh yeah, he was a good player. No, he was a multi-time 6th Man of the Year award winner. He really kind of popularized his style of play, street ball, crossovers, bench, microwave scoring. He was really the first of his kind. If D. Rose doesn't make the Hall of Fame, he'd be one of the first MVPs to not make that list. And because Derrick Rose won his MVP at such a young age, and then everything went downhill from there, people like to think oh, well, what else did he do in his career? Now, granted, this offseason, we heard of a lot of players that are getting their jersey retirement. First of all, Vince Carter is getting his jersey retired by the Toronto Raptors. He's also getting it retired by the Brooklyn Nets. And obviously there's more, right? And then he doubles down on this tweet and he says, and Baron Davis better be in the Hall of Fame too. 20K points and 6,000 assists. Now, is this just Nick Young hyping up his boys? I know he has a close relationship with Baron Davis. He's on their podcast. He talks to all these players, right? I mean, obviously, he doesn't want to give his homies flowers. But when we think of Derrick Rose's MVP years and everything he did post that, I think NBA teams, when they choose to retire certain players, they do it because of the history that player had provided. So I think it's an organization-to-organization standard. Derrick Rose, during his time with the Bulls, during his peak with the Bulls, he was giving them 60-plus win seasons. He was giving them something to look forward to. And granted, he ran into the Heatles. That was probably the toughest matchup that he's ever had to face. And, I mean, the whole NBA had to face at that time, because when the Heatles formed, that being LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, they were just tough for anyone to beat, right? So, Derrick Rose deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, is this going to be a case of the first time that he's nominated, he's going to get in it? I don't know. But I can see a case. Because when we think of the Basketball Hall of Fame, people like to think of just the NBA. While that is true, D. Rose in college was a cold man. He was dropping crazy stats. He went into the March Madness tournament, upped his points up to 20 points per game, which in college, that's probably insane, especially for the era he was in. And before the tournament, they'd only lost one game. Granted, they didn't win the national championship because they got knocked out. But only losing 2 games in your national college, that's not bad at all, especially when you're hovering around 30 to 35 games, only losing 2 of those. That's pretty good. And then it's a sentimental thing, honestly. Derrick Rose embodies like not giving up in basketball culture. Everyone always wanted to see Derrick Rose succeed. The night that he dropped 50, the basketball world was in unison, right? Because they loved what they saw. And if you're not going to put him in the Hall of Fame, you're kind of almost discrediting that. And if anything, in my eyes, it kind of discredits the MVP, the award itself, because if you're not giving a guy who won MVP honors of being in the Hall of Fame, then it kind of just like defeats the whole purpose, right? Because if they were the best player in the league at one point, right, and the NBA acknowledges this, then why are they not one of the best if we have guys that respectfully, right, played in the 60s, and everyone likes to say we're done with the 80s and we're done with the 70s. If some of those guys are in the Hall of Fame, then I think even if we want to see it like, oh, let's just give him a pass, then let's give Derrick Rose that pass, right? I think he's earned it. I think he's done enough. He's tried to battle these injuries. He's tried to make it work in every organization he has and could to the best of his ability. Now, back to Swaggy P's point, does Jamal Crawford and Baron Davis deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? That's a completely different topic that maybe we got some special guests in the future episodes that we can maybe talk about. Does this player deserve to be in the Hall of Fame or not? You got to stay tuned for that. But, okay, so bottom line, Derrick Rose retired, and Derrick Rose deserves to be in the Hall. I think he does, without question. Next up, we got this segment from Jimmy Kimmel Live. Magic Johnson was just on the show a couple nights ago, and he said his advice for Bronny James, who, for those of you who don't know, was drafted with the 55th overall pick in this year's NBA draft, second round, to the Los Angeles Lakers, which, for those of you who also don't know, Bronny James' father plays for the Lakers, that being the guy, I don't know if you heard of him, LeBron James. LeBron James and Bronny are going to be the first ever father-son duo in basketball. So, like, on the same court at the same time, that's going to be pretty crazy, a pretty surreal moment. We got you covered, though, on the Hooper, and we're going to post all those editing clips out there for you guys to make sure like, comment, and subscribe on those. But Magic Johnson said for Bronny, if I'm Bronny, I would tell my dad, just let me play in the G League all season so that I can develop. Now, Bronny James, I have a friend who's like a hardcore LeBron fan, so he's like pretty much in unison with Bronny that Bronny's going to be a multi-time All-Star. And while I hope you guys know he's kidding, sometimes it gets on my last nerve because he stresses it to the moon that that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, Bronny James, if you look at the player as a whole, he's not that tall, but he's athletic as hell. Bronny James measures around 6'2", 6'3", maybe on a good day. If you saw his G League highlights, if you saw his Summer League highlights, he was a really, really good player. For the spurts that you saw him in, he's good defensively. He's good laterally. His offense needs to come a long way. He does not have a viable shot. He drives in when he can. He's very strong around the rim, though, and he holds his own. That being said, on a team that has championship aspirations. Now, are they a championship favorite? Notice how I didn't say they were a championship favorite, because I can acknowledge that the Los Angeles Lakers this year are not in that top echelon of, like, these are the best NBA teams. But they have aspirations, right? When you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, you hope to be a champion. For a team like that needs guys that are ready to go, 3-and-D role players. Now, can Bronny develop into that? Yes, he can, but not this year. Bronny, in 2 or 3 years, he could possibly develop into that. Like a spot 10 to 15 minute a game guy, maybe even 20, right? Like, I'm over here giving him low end 10 to 15, but if he's developed correctly, this man can play a pivotal role on a really good team. But like every second round pick, they get developed and thrown into the G League. And that's completely normal. But for whatever reason, we've decided that because he has the name James on his jersey, that he is going to be held to a different standard than everyone else, which is okay, right? Because that's how you push people. But the kid suffered a heart problem. He went through surgery, and he was still able to play his college season, go through NBA workouts. So the fact that this kid is even playing basketball, that in itself is a miracle. I think that if Bronny can get some G League run and develop into a good enough shooter, like a sub high 30s, like 35-ish to 38, and then with like a steal a game, good efficiency, he can guard big because he can already guard big, but if he can guard even bigger, like if he can guard a 2 guard in the NBA, that's like 6'6", 6'7", that can help his game out a lot, because right now I feel like if he gets switched on to, you know, the Brandon Ingrams of the world, or like those, I don't know why I said Brandon Ingram, by the way, that's like completely random, but if we can develop him into this defender, spot minutes, sharpshooter, the Lakers hit the jackpot, right? And I want to say that the Lakers drafted him because they saw this potential. I would hope so. But I don't think Magic Johnson's in the wrong for saying this. Now, Magic Johnson's going to receive flack for this because he's going to be like, oh, look, he doesn't like Bronny and he thinks he should stay with his dad all season. And I think he's right here. I think you hurt Bronny's health. You hurt Bronny's growth. You stunt his growth if you keep him glued to the bench all season. JJ Redick, first-time head coach, was asked just in his media day introduction, like, what do you think the relationship will be like between Bronny and LeBron? Are you going to play them a lot? Full transparency from JJ Redick, which, honestly, that's better. Okay, full transparency. This episode is being recorded Friday, September 27th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. For those of you, I'm based over here in the Pacific. While we were talking about Bronny and everything, a Shams bomb just broke. Breaking, the Minnesota Timberwolves are nearing a trade to send all-star Karl-Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks. Sources tell me, John, that's insane. Now we have an update. The Knicks are nearing a trade to send a package around Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo to Minnesota for Cat. And here's Bobby Marks chiming in. He says, according to league sources, teams are still working through the details, but talks have intensified over the last 24 hours. That is insane. For those of you who don't know, Karl-Anthony Towns is arguably one of the best big man shooters of all time. Getting traded to the Knicks. Wow, that's insane. Karl-Anthony Towns is, if I'm not mistaken, a New York native. He's from Jersey. Wow. And then the Knicks are going to be breaking up Dante DiVincenzo and the Nova boys. Wow, that is insane. Hey, welcome to the First Pick podcast, right? All right, so this trade kind of makes sense for both sides. This is just a quick, let's talk about it. This trade makes sense. Okay, this is what we know right now. The Timberwolves are receiving Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle, and the Knicks are receiving Karl-Anthony Towns. That is insane, right? Okay, so the Timberwolves move away from the two big lineup, which is Cat and Rudy Gobert, and they go small with Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. That is a great return. If I'm the Timberwolves, that's a great return. You get out of that Cat contract, you basically get an all-NBA level power forward in Randle, and you get a guy like Dante, who in the playoffs was averaging a cool like 16 to 18 points per game with like crazy threes to put next to like Ant Edwards. Now, the Knicks receiving Cat, obviously Mitchell Robinson is going to be out for the foreseeable future. They needed a guy that can come in and play center. Cat has done that in his career. Was he a great defensive center? No, but he adds another viable option on offense. Okay, now that the trade has happened, or that it's going to happen, I think this is a power move by the Knicks for sure. Breaking up those Nova boys before they even started, now that's crazy. Can we talk about the offseason the Knicks are having, though? Getting Cat, getting McCall, basically putting all your chips in like, this is what's happening. This is our core. Now you kind of got a pretty good starting lineup. You got JB, you got McCall, you got Cat, you got Josh Hart, you got a bunch of guys coming off the bench. Let me look at the Knicks lineup this season. That is insane. All right. How did I forget? OG Anunoby, Precious Achua. I'm a big believer in the point guard that they drafted, Tyler Kolek. I think that dude's going to be a freaking beast. Miles McBride. They sacrificed some depth in order to get, better. And, it's when you want to win, that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, these are the type of moves that, looking back, when you look into the NBA season and you're like, whoa, what pushed them over the edge? It's moves like these that at first you're like, what just happened? And then you say, okay, that is the turning point. A guy like Randle was probably going to be growing disgruntled in that locker room. I mean, and it sucks because Randle, full transparency, I'm a Laker guy. I love Randle. I've followed his career since he left LA, went to the Pelicans, went to New York, and he really built that culture over there. He was really that first guy that really took New York head on. He embodied what New York was. So it does suck that he's leaving, especially in a way like this in a trade. Now, I do think that all of this is gonna like come to light within the next 24 to 48 hours. Like, why now? Why was this a problem now? Like, from the Knicks side, they needed a center. I think Randle was growing uncomfortable in that environment. I'm just putting my 2 cents together. I think that the Knicks were probably already looking to trade Randle and his big contract. They probably didn't want to pay him. And that tipping, I think what hurts the Knicks most is losing Dante DiVincenzo, full transparency. But to get a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns, that's a really, really good move by the Knicks. Really, really happy for them. Now we're going to see what the rest of the draft compensation looks like. Was there any picks involved? Is it just players straight up for each other? If it's just players straight up for each other, I think early prediction winners, I would probably think... Okay, now we got an update from Fred Katz. The Knicks and Timberwolves will need a third team to facilitate a Julius Randle, Dante, and Cat trade. Both teams are above the first apron, making neither allowed to take on more money than it sends out in the deal. New York still needs to send out an additional $8.8 million. They can't take back more salary than they're adding, since they're $178 million over the first apron. However, I'm also hearing that the Timberwolves cannot take on more money, and a third team must be involved. So this trade is going to get pretty big, pretty quickly. That's tough. If I were to think of a third team, now granted this is being recorded at 7:24, the news just dropped. I think the deal's going to go through, obviously. If the two teams agreed on it, they can find someone to take on cap space. Who's the big winner of this trade? I think it's the Timberwolves. I think that two big lineup with Cat and Gobert, it works, but we already saw its peak best. I think it's a semifinals team in the Western Conference. I think him and Gobert could not have coexisted. I think Cat cannot guard the perimeter. He's a poor defender. And that's not me bashing on Cat. That sounds like I'm bashing on Cat. But no, he's a good defender. But, when you put him on power forwards, it's going to be really, really tough. And honestly, their perimeter defenders really made up all that slack. And then you had a guy like, Rudy Gobert right there patrolling the paint. Not saying that Randle's a better defender, but I just think Randle brings a different element to that team. He brings ball responsibility duties off, and I think he can create for himself. He can shoot a three. He can, I think, mainly create for himself, which is what Cat could do, but not to the extent that Randle could do, if that makes sense. And I just bringing in a guy like Dante to that team, I think he's going to come in, be a guy that can get 13 to 14 points per game in the regular season. That's a really, really good pickup for them. Besides that, hey man, this first Pick Podcast episode here with Hooper. We're really excited for the future and what we have going on. Make sure to hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, and make sure to follow us on our Instagrams. We have Hooper basically everywhere. We have different accounts. We have Hooper LA, NYC, New York, Chicago. Make sure to follow all of us on all those platforms. They're all going to be links in this bio for sure. Make sure to follow us too on the First Pick Pod _ at Instagram. That's also going to be in the bio. And make sure to follow us on TikTok. Anything is going to be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much to everyone that clicked play on this video. You guys mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much. Maybe next episode we'll have the full trade details out, but thank you so much for clicking play on this video. This has been Hooper Manny. Peace.
You allow him to turn the corner. Mama, there goes that